From the John DeVita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Armchair Experts with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network and Jack O'Lantern FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich on Wednesday, October the 15th, the year 2014. And now, here they are, Jim and Rich.
Off and running on another edition of the Armchair Experts down here from the Pumpkin Patch, the DeVita Broadcast Center. Look at all this around here, Rich. Jeez.
I was listening to our intro music, and I'm feeling groovy.
That's why Peggy referred to you as comic relief yesterday when I was having a cup of coffee over at the library.
Oh,
Where's your comic relief?
It never ceases to amaze me. I sit down and take a good look at the DeVita Broadcast Center, and it's really, sometimes we probably have been here often enough that you start to take it for granted. But today I just took another look around, and I said, this is just an awesome place.
It really
in a
is.
Gentleman's basement.
Yeah.
And we have a broadcast center. It's excellent.
John, you're amazing. You always do amaze us. John DeVita.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
we appreciate what you have done here.
Providing us a spot to do whatever it is we do every couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And all the work over at the high school to make sure we're on the air for football and basketball.
The last couple of games we had too. There's been some. I don't know anything about any of these technology type of things, and I don't think this was high technology. But we had some problems with the, I guess it was the on-field sound.
The public address was not working.
I'll tell you, John worked a couple of games. One game in particular, I think it was that homecoming or the game before homecoming. Really hard to get that thing back up and running.
Yeah. And I think he eventually just reached over and swatted it, and it worked.
That was the. Yeah,
he's nodding.
He's
yep.
nodding. That was it.
Yeah.
Well, otherwise, the girls, the Palms and Cheers or whoever we have out there weren't able to perform. We weren't able to hear Jim DeRose, give information to the crowd as it happened or after the fact, and. John did some yeoman work up there, along with Kevin and Will jumped in. Will Acevedo,
and we just sit there like a couple of mopes.
Yeah, If it was up to us, the whole thing would be silent. We'd probably still be talking. We wouldn't care about that.
We would talk, but
we'd talk to each other.
Yeah, we would talk, but nobody would hear us.
Yeah.
And they'd probably be better off for it.
Right.
So, we had what we always like to laughingly refer to as show prep, and I have no idea what we talked about yesterday. I can't remember.
Yeah, I park my car. I meet Jim, and we walk over the half a block that is from his house to John's. And we both agreed, what the heck did we talk about in show prep last night? So we don't know what we're talking about. Well, of course, everybody agrees with that anyway. We don't know what we're talking about.
There was an interesting article here, as John always has the papers out for us, and flipped over about Carcillo, Dan Carcillo. And the article, Herb Gould's article in the Sun-Times today, is Enforcers Are a Dying Breed. But Carcillo insists there's still a place for players like him.
I'd say we just briefly touched on this before we got on the air. I just say, hey, when you got a guys flying around as fast as they do in the NHL and hitting each other legally, being able to check each other, and sometimes not so legally because you just can't help it, or maybe it's intentional. Yeah, you're going to have a guy who needs to take care of business, I think, still on the ice.
I think there's still, I think at times there's still a need for it. He is not, the fourth line, he's out there about, I think the one from the game over the weekend, Saturday night when they opened?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think he played 9 minutes.
Yeah.
But he scored, so I guess there was a plus.
Yeah, well, I think Danny Carcillo is one of the enforcers, if you want to call him that, in the league that has a skill set, maybe a little bit better skill set than your normal.
A little bit better.
And so he is capable of doing some things if he plays with even. I remember when he first came, he was originally paired with Taves and Hossa.
Yeah. And you know what I mean? It's different than the old days of the enforcers, where you'd see a guy, you'd look at his stat line at late in the season, and you see he's played in all the games. He has 1 assist and 367 penalty minutes.
Yeah, that's there. There was a lot of guys.
There was guys like that.
I'm thinking, Jim. I remember. Billy Prino was a classmate of ours. And
Right.
we're at Bill's house and watching the Hawks versus the Canadians in this. I think it was the Stanley Cup Finals, and it was sometime in the early '70s.
Probably
And-
that 70, probably that 71 final.
It's possible. And one of the games at the Montreal Forum, there was some rough stuff going on, and Billy Ray, I think, was still the coach.
Right.
And he sent Jerry, after the initial dust-up, he sent out Rick Foley and Jerry Korab, and actually the Hawks had 2 nasty customers on the roster at that point. And I looked at Billy, and I think Scott Wazalis was there, and whoever else was in the group, Pat Kelly probably. I said, that's it. As soon as they drop the puck, or shortly thereafter, it's going to be a fight. I said, look who he just sent out. He said, what do you think's going to happen? And sure enough, within a minute, I'm sure, everything broke loose, and there was a fight.
Did you ever hear the story how Korab got his nickname?
King Kong Korab?
King Kong Korab?
No.
They were playing Boston, and he had just come up from whatever the minor league team was, and they're out there for a pregame skate, and everybody's skating around, and Korab was going one way, Derek Sanderson was going the other way, and I don't know who was behind Korab, but as he skated past, Sanderson said to the Hawk player behind him, "Oh my God, where did you get the gorilla?"
Oh, okay. Where did you get the gorilla? Okay.
And there was the nickname.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it's going to, totally die just because of the nature of the game.
No, I think it's not as common as it used to be.
No.
You still get those. You still get those. You will still get those games where everybody decides to. Everybody, at some point in time, the puck drops and everybody pairs off.
Honestly, Jim, over the summer, they had talked because they had let Bola go up to, I think, was it Calgary, and then Brookbank also was let go. And those were probably their 2 tough guys from last year.
Yeah.
And there was some talk that they might not have anybody filling that particular role. And I have to say, in reading it, I wasn't all that comfortable with that thought, because I think at some point, when they decide to knock around some of your better players, you better have an answer to that.
Because you know what I mean. Who are they going to go? Who are the team's going to go after? You're going to go after Taves. You're going to go after Kane.
Right.
And I think it was a couple of years ago. I had to laugh when I think it was the game. Was it the series that they played a couple of years ago against the Kings? And Taves dropped the gloves against Joe.
Joe Thornton. Maybe?
Joe Thornton.
Yeah.
And as he dropped the gloves and looked at Thornton looked at him and goes, with this look on his face, like, "Dude, you sure?
Are you sure you want to do this?" Yeah. Well, when you think about, as you're saying, Taves and Kane, I'm thinking back to Hull and Makita, and it's a totally different thing. Bobby Hull was a really strong guy who could take care of himself, and you would see him fight fairly often.
I also saw him drop the gloves against somebody one night, threw the gloves down, assumed the pose, and the guy on the other end went,
"So that's enough." Yeah.
Okay, no, never mind.
and Stan Makita actually started his career, not as an enforcer, but he was a feisty, sort of a chippy type of player who
led the league in penalties.
Over the years, changed his game from leading the league in penalties to being
leading the league in scoring.
Trophy winner as well.
Yeah, and leading the league in scoring.
And for those of you, and what did they? Who was the Johnny Carson used to say, for those of you in, is it Anaheim? That means that, or is that Rush Limbaugh that says that? For you, those of you wherever, Lady Byng Trophy is the trophy for gentlemanly play, the least penalized player in the league.
That's right.
And I was going to say, though, even and I don't want to go on too much further on this, but
No.
Even a guy like Gordie Howe, one of your premier players, Bobby Orr was another one. Those guys could go. I mean,
That's right.
they could. They didn't have any
Just
problem dropping the gloves and
still-
going at it.
Just remember what a Gordie Howe hat trick is.
A Gordie Howe hat trick, yes,
That's right.
is a goal, an assist, and a fight,
And a fighting penalty.
at a fighting penalty. Yes.
Yeah, you know. Hey, we had a good Bears game over the weekend.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not that surprised, Jim. I think we talked a little bit, and you had said that had we had the show say last week, you would have predicted a Bears win. I think I would have probably gone along with you on that.
Yeah, it was not that was not a particularly good Atlanta defense. It's a good offense, but it's not a particularly good defense, and the fact that you had a healthy Brandon Marshall, a healthy Alshon Jeffrey, and I think at one point in time, they had about 2 yards between the two of them. They had about 2 yards less than the entire Atlanta offense.
I think the other thing that sort of motivated the team was all the talk about Devin Hester leading up to the week, because
And he was a non-factor.
I was at the store and I walked back into the electronics department just to watch a little bit of the game, and it happened to be a kickoff. So the Bears had just scored. Hester took the ball a couple yards in the end zone, and he didn't even get out to the 20. But the thing wasn't so much Hester, but just I would use the word ferocity or intensity of the coverage impressed me, and I'm thinking, if you would have said, can you make a prediction after watching one play, I would have predicted that the Bears were going to win, because they were after him. I mean, not him in particular, but they were making sure that he wasn't going to, get a big gain. And the intensity was amped way up from what I saw.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting with all the talk. Oh my God, that Marshall isn't doing anything. You know who's leading the NFL in receptions right now?
Marshall?
No, Matt Forte.
Oh, Forte. Okay.
46 passes.
Gee, you know what?
When this was, I don't know what last night brought with anything, if anything. He's on a pace to become only the third player in NFL history to have 1,000 yards rushing and receiving in the same season.
Sometimes I don't know what to make of Matt Forte. I would never ever say that Matt Forte is a bad player, but a lot of times I think of myself, geez, is he really making an impact? He's so low key, or the media low keys him so much. And that's probably because he himself is maybe a low-key guy.
He's a very low-key guy.
But he is a force. When you say over, what are they played, 6 games, that Forte has 46 catches, I had no clue that he was, being targeted that often.
I mean,
no clue.
He's 6th in the league in rushing, 399 yards with 2 touchdowns. 46 catches, 376 yards. As I said, only the third play. He's on pace to be the third player in NFL history to have 1,000 yards rushing and receiving in the same year. Can you tell me who the other two are?
Oh, say that again, Jim. What's the question?
1,000 yards rushing and receiving in the same season.
And he's going to be with how many?
Third. He would be the third player. It's only been done twice.
I don't know. I would guess, Marshall Falk, maybe.
He's one. He was the second one to do it.
Is the other guy?
You're gonna have to go back a little earlier.
Is the other guy a former Bear?
No.
Okay.
49er.
A 49er that would have to be then. Geez, I'm not gonna. I could picture the guy. I'm not gonna be able to come up with a name though.
80s.
Is it?
80s. In the 80s.
Geez.
Roger Craig.
Yeah, okay. The guy I was going to say the guy who came from Minnesota. Didn't he originally start with the Vikings and the 49ers got him from them?
I don't.
For some reason, there's a Minnesota connection with
don't
Roger
know.
Craig.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I always just remember him as a 49er.
Okay.
But those were the other two.
Okay.
So.
You know who was a guy I thought was a guy who did a lot of receiving and running wasn't Chuck Foreman in that sort of
Chuck Foreman
category?
was that mold too.
Maybe I'm thinking of Chuck Foreman and not Roger Craig.
Maybe that was it.
I tell you though, not that I think that Matt Forte needs to have the violin played for him, but it's sort of a tough gig being a running back who is effective as Matt Forte. But when you have to think of the history of Bears running backs and how legendary a lot of them were, you're always being compared against. I mean, you have one of the most spectacular guys in Gale Sayers, a guy who a lot of people would say might be the best player ever to play the game in Walter Payton, a legend, a guy who helped really keep the NFL in business in Red Grange, and another legendary character in Bronco Nagurski, not to mention really good guys like Willie Gallimore, Rick Caceres, Neil Anderson. It's pretty easy to get lost in the shuffle.
It's easy. It's easy, and you're brought in and say, well, you're going to carry on in the tradition of these guys, and some guys can't handle it. Some guys just weren't capable of it. Really, I mean, when we start talking about what I want to talk about today, is I want to talk about the frustrating players. And I can name a couple of Bear running backs.
Yeah, that's true. Although Jim, I think I probably could intuit that some of the guys you're going to name, but the one guy that I'm pretty sure you're going to mention, Rashaan Salam.
You betcha.
And then there was the other guy,
Curtis Enis.
Mm-hmm. Just thinking in general now, not on your topic, I'm pretty sure both of those guys broke the 1,000-yard mark once in their career.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't have long careers. But it makes me also think back to when we were kids, guys like Jimmy Brown and Jim Taylor and whoever else was, I think Caceres was probably a 1,000-yard rusher at least once. That was a 12-game season. So you had, I did the math on it one time, so you had I think it's something like, you had to average about 85, 86 yards to get to 1,000, 80, for the year. Now today in 16 games, I think you have to do about 20 yards less, 65, 66. It's in the 60s somewhere. So it's a totally different standard, and not quite as steep a standard as back in the days of 12 games, where it really meant something. Today, I'm not saying it doesn't mean anything. It's a lot of yardage, but it's not quite the same thing.
You think about if you want to think about an even more amazing one. I don't even know if they were playing 12 games back then. The first guy that ever ran for 1,000 yards.
Who was that? Beatty Feathers.
Beatty Feathers back in the 30s.
Yeah,
I don't even know if they were playing a 12-game season.
They might. Well, yeah, you probably didn't have. I don't think at that point in time you probably really didn't have a. How would you say it? I don't know that every team probably even played the same number of games because the league was still pretty. It was only a little more than 10 years old when you're talking about.
I think Feathers was later 30s, so it may have been a little
30s.
More organized at that point.
Yeah, it's really, but yeah, 12. I would say he probably played 10. Well, he might have played 10 games. They might have been because I don't.
Might have been a 10 game then.
Because and I think that it's let's see, how many teams were in the league? 12-team league was when we first started to be aware of football. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to say this for sure. It could have been less teams in the league in the 30s, and I'm not positive about that. So you could have had less of a schedule. You could have maybe had a 10 or 11 game schedule.
It was very possible it could have been a 10 or 11 game season. And I mean, as a kid getting to go to Bears games late in the year, and, these were a bunch of people that have been going to Bears games since the 30s.
Right.
This was, late 60s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
So there was always a lot of reminiscing.
Yeah, sure.
Especially in those days when, your big Bear running back was, a Ronnie Bull or a Joe Marconi, and a big rushing season for the Bears then was 400 yards.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
Although,
and we thought Andy Livingston was going to be the savior.
well, Andy Livingston, I have to say, I almost threw in guys who were.
There's one that can go on the frustrating list.
Well, I don't know. I'm more frustrated with George Halas on that one than I am with Andy Livingston. But I would say even guys who were not super productive in their careers with the Bears for various reasons, but had been spectacular either in small portions or prior to the beginning of the Bears. You had guys like, I almost was going to say guys like Andy Livingston or John Arnett, who came here.
John
late in
Arnett
his
came
career.
from the Rams.
Yeah.
He played on that 63 title team, didn't he?
No, he came probably
come
more
after?
like 64, 65.
Okay.
He was actually, I think, Sayers' backup, and they would
Okay,
spot him
yeah.
into the game, and
Yeah.
he was still a spectacular runner. He just
Yeah.
didn't play as much.
Yeah.
But the whole thing for me is that not as many games or more games, 4 more games. And now they're talking. I have friends who say, "Why are they playing any exhibition games, or why don't they just play 2 and have an 18-game season?" And the players themselves are balking at that because and I think rightfully so. I'd be 100% with the players on this. Obviously the NFL is talking about, it would say 18 games, you got 18 meaningful games versus 4 exhibitions and 16 meaningful games. But I think the risk of injuries is already pretty great.
I think
and it would get greater.
Yeah, and they've complained about that, and they've also complained about this all these Thursday night games now.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's another totally legitimate beef.
I think that's a legitimate beef too.
But I think in that case, Jim, I think your TV. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. I remember a little bit about what we talked about. TV is running the show to such a great extent that you're part of an entertainment package here. And Thursday night is a night they like to slip in there for whatever. I don't know how much money they rake off of a Thursday night broadcast. Must be considerable.
And they've had some dog games this year on Thursday night.
Well, that's good. But I guess my point was going to be the players. I would say are, I'm not going to say partially to blame, but they're involved in this thing in the sense that they obviously you like to make big money, so they're sort of at the beck and call of the league and the TV stations, and they want to make the big bucks, and this is part of the deal.
Yeah, and who knows how much they make on a Thursday night? I guess CBS is looking to go up against ABC's Thursday night lineup. I guess they want to beat Scandal.
The one thing that one of the things that I would respect the NFL for that they've tried to keep inviolate, if that's the right word. They haven't gone to Friday Night Football because they realize that a lot of high school ball is played then, and probably some college, and they don't want to affect the game's attendance there. I think they want people to
get
get
college
jazzed
games
up on college and high school
You
football.
get college games on Thursday nights too.
And they don't go to Saturday till after the college season is pretty much
Right.
totally done. And because you don't want to jump into the college football Saturday afternoon and evening lineup. So I think that's totally the right thing for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't want Steve Dahl dead airtime. So I better keep talking. What do you got in your mind next here, sir?
I don't know. I was waiting for some other profound thought.
I've got a lot of profound thoughts.
You know what I
want me to
mean?
keep going?
And I've been. I think we never got to it, but I saw an article this week or recently, and it made me think about some things that you and I have talked about in the past about players playing in the wrong position, or players trying to be forced into a system that they had no business playing in, or it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And I made me think about that when I saw a couple of weeks ago that Charlie Weiss got whacked as the head coach at Kansas after winning 6 games in a little over 2 years. And he had got whacked at Notre Dame a few years prior to that, after having a great start in his coaching career at Notre Dame, and then after suddenly the tide turned, and I think over the last 4 years he may have won like 16 games.
Mm-hmm.
So Notre Dame had signed him to a ridiculously long extension that everybody kind of wondered about when he did it. So suddenly you have two schools, two universities that are going to wind up paying Charlie Weis $26 million not to coach them.
Well, shame on them.
Shame on them.
And
the other point was, and it made me think of that when I saw an article on Lane Kiffin.
Mm-hmm.
Lane Kiffin has had 3 coaching opportunities. He was coaching, his first head opportunity as a head coach was with the Raiders. And he didn't do well there, but then again, when you work for Al Davis, and I'm not sure how well if Al was completely there at that point.
Well, even when he was completely
there, you never quite knew. And then he went to Tennessee, took a college job at Tennessee, had some success there, and then ran away when he got the USC offer. He got fired at USC, and I'm trying to remember. He got fired before they got on the plane to come back home, or got fired at the airport. But he's having great success now in his first season as a offensive coordinator at Alabama. So, you think about him being an offensive coordinator having success. Weis was a very successful offensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
New England, right?
Yeah.
And then he wound up at Kansas City.
Yeah.
Didn't he wind up at Kansas City in between?
In between Notre Dame and Kansas.
Yeah.
That's probably where he made the Kansas connection.
That's where he made the Kansas connection. So I begin to question, do coaches wind up in the wrong position? And I'll throw it out and say, are we sure yet? Is Trestman in the right position with the Bears?
Yeah, you're making a great point. And I have to say, Jim, there's things that I ticked off in my mind as you were talking here leading up to, asking me the question. I could probably do a whole show on some things that popped into my head as you were talking, and I won't go into that. And I didn't jot them down, so I probably won't even remember. There was four things that I was thinking of.
By the time we walk out the door, he'll have forgotten everything.
I have to say, I will answer your question.
John's sitting in there smiling. He says, "Now you know what it's going to be like when you're my."
Yeah. I have to say this, and I'll make it real quick. I don't think we joke around about show prep, but when we talk and say you just mentioned several things there leading up to what I'm going to respond to. Again, there was about 4 points for sure that popped into my head that I have, extensive thoughts about and could speak on, and maybe we could do a whole show on any of them. So we've probably been prepping our whole lives to have these conversations on the air. So I think show prep is, it probably doesn't apply to us in the same sense it might apply to other people. But back to your question, I think you're right on the money. I always go back to my least favorite Bears coach, I think, Dave Wannstedt, who was actually, I think and this is what I would also say. Dave Wannstedt is probably an excellent football coach, and when I say that, he's an excellent coach in his area of expertise, which is defense. But he wasn't a good head coach. He wasn't a good head coach here, wasn't a good head coach down, and I think he was in Miami. And then he went to his alma mater, University of Pittsburgh, and had, fair success there, but it really didn't last. And it just makes me feel, and one of the points I was thinking about when you started about Charlie Weis, I go back to what I said that we've talked about, say, the 30 Major League Baseball teams, each having a closer. And the odds of how are there actually going to be 30 good closers out there? Everybody uses one. That's not going to happen. Well, you have God knows how many football coaching positions, and you're not going to have that many good head football coaches.
You are not going to be able to get ones. You may have good football you may wind up having a good football coach, but the level that he's at
Oh, yeah.
is not something he can be prepared for.
Well, a coach has got to have a vision. I mean, we talked a little bit yesterday about when Lombardi came to the Packers.
Right.
You have a vision, and that vision has probably developed over time. The other thing is, I think, and this doesn't seem to apply in Charlie Weiss's case, but it applied in Lombardi's case. He coached for a legendary coach in Red Blake. And I think one of the things that, in reading a little bit about that relationship, is he just got the whole idea of preparation and, just repetition to get your team honed to where you want it to be, to run what you want it to run. And that was very important in his case. I was going to say, in Charlie Weiss's case, he was with Bill Belichick, who was a very well-prepared coach, but obviously, maybe Weiss is, and I'm not trying to down Charlie Weiss. I mean, we don't know the man or anything.
No.
But maybe Charlie Weiss has got an inflated idea of his own abilities.
Yeah.
Okay, I worked under Belichick. I know this, and this, but you know what? It was my offense that did that. Well, it's not really like that. You have to have ego, but you also have to be realistic.
You have to be realistic, and I think people are seeing that. I think Kiffin may learn that now.
Mm-hmm.
Being down in Alabama now,
with Saban, right?
With Nick Saban, because assistants that have worked for Saban. First of all, Saban doesn't allow his assistants to talk to the press.
Okay.
But assistants that have worked with Saban saying, you work for Nick Saban, that is a postgraduate course on how to be on how to be a head football coach.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got to remember, Nick Saban didn't have a great amount of success prior to coming to first couple of jobs. Nick Saban didn't do very well. At least two jobs. Michigan, he won. Michigan State, he won between 6 and 9 games.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, he went to LSU then, didn't he?
LSU. Yeah.
He had some. He did well at LSU. Coached the Dolphins and flopped.
Right.
And then came back to college ball.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And is hugely successful. How many national championships can you have? But the one thing that was said, and I'm looking at John. You want a station break, John?
Okay, thanks, John.
Okay. One of the things that I read in the article was, and it was a good quote from Jerry DiNardo, who is the analyst on the Big Ten Network, on their pre- and post-game shows, said that, and he's coached in 3 schools along the way, Vanderbilt, LSU, and Indiana.
Okay.
He said, you cannot, if you're the head coach, you can't be attending all the staff meetings.
Mm.
He said, because if you do, you're going to be letting something else go.
Mm-hmm.
There's other duties that you need to do.
Okay.
He said, and a guy like Kiffin, all Kiffin wants to do is coach quarterbacks and have an offense. And maybe what he'll do somewhere down the road because of his age, he might get another coaching job, but maybe what it's going to have to be is a small school.
Okay.
Where he won't have the pressure. Let's take a break.
You are listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Jack-O-Lantern FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Wednesday, October the 15th, the year 2014, with Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. And you are listening to Jack-O-Lantern WRHS FM 89.7 Norwich, Illinois. And now, back to Jim Leon and Rich Massaro and Armchair Experts.
Gee, we're gonna. I forgot it's Jack-O-Lantern FM time.
Hey.
we're going to be listening to a lot of Bobby Boris Pickett.
You bring up a subject that is profoundly interesting to me. Let me first say you put Mark Trestman's name into part of your statement and question. I think Trestman, obviously the jury's out. He's 11-11 so far.
Right.
His NFL coaching career. But I'd say the two things that he's consistently been able to do is improve the play of the guys who play quarterback for him, regardless of wherever he's been and whatever guys he's been in. And somehow he has really been able to make the offensive lines that have played for him protect the quarterback better. And I think that is a spectacular feat, because I don't think that's very easy. It's really a tough thing to do.
And to do it as quick as they did.
Yeah,
that's
phenomenal.
They went out and rebuilt that.
Right. Well, what I'm talking about though, initially last year, they brought in some new guys. They brought in some rookies.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing that when he was in Montreal, with the exact same offensive line, he had knocked. He had gone from maybe the most sacked team in the league, and knocked that down by 20, 30 sacks with the exact same personnel. So they have a knack, or they have some kind of a system, whatever you want to call it, that really is pretty effective.
Yeah.
And whether he's going to be a good head coach, I don't know.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, the jury's out. You still can't class it.
But
a guy that I think talk about being in the wrong position. Maybe he's a good head coach. He has a reputation of being a nice guy, all that. But I'm beginning to think Tim Beckman's way over his head, coaching at this level.
It would seem that way. The college coach, I think, has so much more going on, so many more hats to wear than the
pro coach.
First off, you have a squad that's a lot bigger. You have to recruit those people. I think that really requires a lot of networking. You have to know a lot of people in high school ball, and people who see these kids and are they going to be good prospects? I'd say this though. What is this, Beckman's second year?
No.
Second or third year?
Third or fourth.
No, it's not his fourth year yet.
He's 1-19 in the Big Ten.
1-19. Yeah, so he's in his third year.
Third year.
I would say this. I don't. Okay, I'll give you an example of maybe something that's working against Beckman. He brought in Lunt to transfer from Oklahoma State. Was it
I think
Lunt?
So. West Lunt, yeah.
Okay. Now the previous coach had been who? Zook?
Yeah.
Okay, Riley, and I'm not knocking these guys either, but Riley O'Toole and Aaron Bailey, two local guys, were on campus already. And I guess it's the difference in the way you look at your personnel. I haven't even seen West Lunt play, and I haven't really seen O'Toole or Bailey play, but the sense I get of the whole thing is Lunt is a much more advanced quarterback than I think either O'Toole or Bailey is, just from what I read.
It's interesting too that you say that, because I listened to a little bit of the game the other day, this past weekend, and Kurt Kittner is the analyst on the games now. And that was pretty much what he said, because you had to reach that point where you're bringing your third-string quarterback in.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And he said he's not at the point where he should be running an offense.
Okay.
Now, I'm not going to say that he's not capable, but that he's not at the point experience-wise that he should be in there.
So I think I guess as you're saying this, you're sort of crystallizing some of my thinking here, because. Okay, now Beckman is being knocked, and rightfully so. They're not having success. But when you look at what he's looking at talent-wise in terms of a quarterback, and he brings in Lunt, who's in the games he played before he got hurt was pretty successful. Was successful initially where he was at prior to this. So maybe Beckman needs some time to bring in the talent he wants to bring in. And again, when you look at,
He ain't going to get it.
well, he might not.
He's not.
But
He's not going to get
when
it.
you look at, say, O'Toole and Bailey, and again, I'm not knocking these guys, but Zook was under pressure at the end, and part of the pressure was, hey, we got guys in state here locally. Why don't let's bring in some local guys and see if they'll do the trick for us. And those guys may or may not be eventually good college quarterbacks. But now the man is that particular coach was starting to recruit under pressure from probably the alums, and brought in guys because he was almost forced to do it. Where maybe if this guy had some time, based on what I know of Lunt, he seems to be a pretty good quarterback. If that's his eye for talent, and if that would be his eye for talent throughout the rest of the team, maybe if he had time to recruit his own guys, you would see a change in what was going on at Illinois. It's pretty obvious to me he probably, unless there's a big turnaround in the last 5 games or whatever they have of the season, he's probably going to be gone, but maybe he just needs time. Joe Novak, when he was at Northern Illinois, literally had probably 10 losing seasons in a row.
Yeah, he had a long stretch.
But because he was at Northern, because they believed in what he was doing, he got the chance, and guess what? It took him a long time, but he turned it around.
Built it into a great program.
Built it into a good program. Now he's had, at least 3 successors, and they've all done well.
And they've all done very well. And they had, and think about this. They lost at home Saturday. That's the first time they've lost at home in 5 years.
I didn't catch who did they lose to?
Central Michigan, I
Central
think.
Michigan. There was the other.
Yeah. And I had to laugh because I was listening to the score Saturday, and Barry Rosner was on, and he's an NIU grad. He's a Northern grad. And he goes, "Oh, my God, this hasn't happened since the Eisenhower administration."
Well, I think the other thing for a coach, and you don't always have, not everybody has the luxury of this happening for them, Jim, is you have to know the surroundings. You have to know if there are other players that are significant players that have an effect on your job. I know that when, again, going back to Lombardi, when he came to Green Bay, of course, he had the luxury of having taken over a team that was terrible. So they were in a desperate situation. But he told the people, because that's owned by the
It's owned by the public,
owned by the fans,
the community, right?
But the Dominic, and I don't think he's still there, but Dominic Olenicek, who was there as I think the president of the team for many years. So I mean, he had obviously a little bit more clout than your normal guy sitting in the upper reaches of the stadium. But Lombardi said, I don't want any guys sending me plays or telling me who to play. That's it. That's my deal. You do that, I'm walking. And I think when you get say you go to a Notre Dame or you go to an Illinois or any of these schools, if you got alumni who are real players and want to really mess you up, they can mess you up. If the people,
easily.
The president of the university, the AD, allow that.
Yeah.
So you need people around you who are strong and are going to stand up for you and give you a chance to do what you do. Otherwise, you're in bad shape.
You're in bad shape, and the other issue too that you also have to consider for Illinois is Illinois has never really been known as a football school.
No, they've had a couple.
They've had
when
some
Mike
runs.
White was there.
Mike
they were
White,
decent, and Pete Elliott was. They were good, very good then.
Yeah,
but that's been few and far.
I mean,
and
you go back
to Zupke.
You go back to after Zupke, Ray Elliott.
They were good at one time,
Yeah.
but since then it hasn't happened. And
when you have a coach like Lou Tepper and
Lou Tepper,
Bob Blackman.
Yeah, Bob Blackman coming from the Ivy League.
Yeah.
And those guys, you know what? Again, those guys know football. It brings up another interesting thing as you were leading into this subject, Jim. I was thinking I had read a little bit about Tony Dungy, and I knew a little bit about Tony Dungy because at the time that I was traveling up in Minnesota, Dungy was playing, I think, and so Trestman, I think, played there at the same time I was up there. So you'd see those names in the paper once in a while. You're a little familiar with them before they went on to other things. And but Dungy in particular really extols his college coach, who was Cal Stoll. And I think Cal Stoll had come from Wake Forest to Minnesota, and had some success there, but wasn't winning the Big Ten every year. But there's another piece of this puzzle. Who is a really good coach or an effective coach who's not a big winning coach? I mean, Cal Stoll's not a super huge name, but Tony Dungy learned a lot of his football from Cal Stoll and went on to be a very good coach in the NFL. So there are I guess my point is there are gradations of coach. I called Rob St. John recently and talked about Chris Zach, our coach here at Ridgewood, and obviously Chris's his record is not his one-loss record is not great, but you know what? There are things that Chris Zach does with young players that I consider to be very good, and I'm not going to go into all that. But I just said, tell Chris this from me. I appreciate a lot of the stuff that he does that people really just don't even know about. And, there's another gradation of a coach. The man is not having a lot of success W and L-wise, but you know what? He's having a positive effect on a lot of his players in other ways.
And that's important, certainly at this level.
Definitely.
Certainly at this level. And I think... obviously, we're seeing it with the effort that's been put in this year.
Oh, definitely.
Even though you're looking at a team that's 3-4 here right now, and have had 3 pretty bad losses.
Yeah.
But the games that you and I saw, even the loss to Fenton, was really good, really great effort.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's been pretty consistent through. And not pretty. I think it's been very consistent through Coach Zach's tenure here.
Yeah.
But let me jump back to. Yeah. I didn't mean to. Obviously, I meant to get on Coach Zach for a second on that subject, but let's jump back to college. Mike Pagliaro Jr., who was a coach at Ridgewood here. It's been a while, 12 years ago. Yeah. Is an assistant coach, I think he still is, I haven't talked to Mike in a while, at Illinois Benedictine College. And I'm not going to be able to come up with the coach's name. I can't think of it right off the bat. But the coach at IBC had been a coach in the high school ranks here and been successful. And IBC had been sort of down in the dumps prior to him coming, and he's built that program and been real successful with it. They've been conference champs, and I think they've been in maybe the Division III playoffs a time or two. But there's another level of coaching where here's a guy who obviously probably loves coaching. He does well at it, but maybe he doesn't want to get into. He recruits. I'm sure he gets good high school players at the level that is appropriate for his team, his type of football. But maybe he doesn't want to get involved in the high level recruiting. He wants to coach basically, and he's successful at it. So there are so many different gradations of coaching and what's effective coaching, and who's a good coach and who's a bad coach. I wouldn't have even begin to try to say how many different levels there are.
It was surprising too. One of the names that I thought about when I was thinking about this issue of coaches who maybe didn't belong. Mm-hmm. Was one example of a coach that everybody kind of scratched their head about and really kind of flopped was Jerry Faust.
Jerry Faust, a great high school coach, and didn't do well at the next level.
And I didn't realize, I didn't even realize that he not only coached at Notre Dame.
He coached at Akron.
Akron for a lot of years, and he had a horrible record at Akron.
Jerry Faust gets a lot of bad press.
Thank you, John.
For the Faust years, and I have to say the one thing I have to say is that even though he's not considered to be a successful coach, he did have a winning record.
He did have a winning record at Notre Dame.
But there's, nobody says that what genius or geniuses decided to take a man, and definitely a very successful, super successful high school coach.
Oh, yeah.
But jump him into the head coaching spot at Notre Dame. Now, I think that I want to say that it was Terry Brennan that had a similar experience where he, of course, he was a Notre Dame alum and a very good football player at Notre Dame. But I think he had been very successful at the high school level. They put him in as head coach at Notre Dame, and he did pretty good.
Succeeded Frank Leahy, didn't he? No. Somebody else was after Leahy.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Elmer Layden, I think, came after Leahy.
That's possible.
Yeah.
But at any rate, I think he had a little bit better success than Faust. But you're also talking about a totally different time and a different dynamic for the head coach of a team like Notre Dame, even though Notre Dame has been a high-profile team for a long time. But, you throw a guy like Faust, who's in a relatively small pool, into a big lake where, you're dealing with the media. You have to recruit people from all over the country because Notre Dame is national. You have a game that's the same but different in a lot of ways because of the way it's played,
the media exposure, everything else.
So
right.
So what guy? Who were the guys who decided to make that decision? I mean, Faust gets the brunt of the criticism, but yeah, really, what is he going to say? I don't want to coach at Notre Dame. I don't want to make a lot more money than I am. I don't want to have my shot at being on the big stage. Anybody would probably say yes to that.
Everybody would take that shot. Well,
the guy, the guys who kill me though, is a guy like Lane Kiffin. He was having success at Tennessee, which is traditionally going back to Colonel Nalen, a very good football school. I mean, you had some legendary coaches there, and he has initial success there. And all of a sudden, Southern Cal opened their checkbooks, or maybe Kiffin's from California. I don't know. But after maybe a year or so of success, he jumps to USC. Well, you're going to get, you're going to get heat immediately just for doing that.
You're going to get heat for that, and then you're also going to get heat for the fact that you're trying to get your players to sign transfer agreements. Mm-hmm.
Which I don't. That never works.
That never works. I mean, you had the example of talk about Tim Beckman before getting off to a bad start. When he was hired, you had the whole Paterno issue going on at Penn State, and him and Beckman and one of his assistants headed out there, and they're trying to get players on Penn State to sign transfer forms.
Yeah, right.
So you got a bad rep right there.
You do, but you know what? Is that it's partially the person. I will agree with that, but it's partially that for lack of a better term, the system. And I'm talking about the overall college system.
That's exactly what I was going to say. He was just trying to work the system, whatever way he could.
Exactly. Yeah. So he was gonna. Hey, you want to be successful. And there's pressure to be successful. So, you know what? That was a natural, in his mind, I guess, natural place to start to try to mine some players.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I agree with it. It's not. I don't think he did anything that was against the rules. But I guess ethically, you're on a gray area there.
It was not the gentlemanly thing to do.
No.
So I think that's really where it led to.
And of course, we know everybody in that profession. They're all gentlemen, so.
I think it was. I don't know who it was. I remember this quote. He says somebody, and it was involving an athlete or a writer, or an athlete or a sports writer or something. When the general manager came up and put his arm around, he says he came up, he put his arm around me and said, we've always had a good relationship, haven't we? He said, and I immediately checked to see if my wallet was still in my pocket.
I tell you, you know what? I have a lot of sympathy for coaches in general. I'm not going to say I've never said that a coach, I've probably said, hey, that coach stinks or whatever. But in reality, when you really sit down and you think about it, it's not easy, and not everybody is up to the task. But again, when you say, you can't say any coach is like a total failure. I mean,
Oh, no.
either he's having,
You know-
maybe the coach is having success with individual players, but there's some success involved, and there's a lot of satisfaction involved in coaching.
And I think about that on a level that I've had a lot of experience with over the years from observing things at semi-pro football. For all the years I've been around semi-pro football, it does have its reputation of being, sometimes I always joked. I said this is just an excuse for a bunch of guys to get together once a week during the summer and early fall to drink beer after the game.
Mm-hmm.
But there are guys who've made a positive impact on some of the players they've had.
Oh,
I
sure.
think the great example was over the weekend. I went up to Racine to see the Chicago Thunder play in the Mid-States Football League Championship against the Racine Raiders, a team that's been around forever and has always been a big powerhouse. But the coach and the owner of the Thunder, Terry Thomas, was inducted into the Mid-States Football League Hall of Fame. Now, this is the third Hall of Fame that Terry's gone into.
Congratulations, Terry.
And, the comments, and it's always been the positive influence that Terry has had on these people. I mean, they joked, we joked about that sitting down a few years ago in Homestead, Florida, when they were invited down to play in the minor league football news championship game. And I remember us sitting down by the pool, and not everybody had gotten in yet down there. Either they were out on South Beach or hadn't come in yet, and we're sitting down there and, sitting down there with a couple of beers and just, enjoying the night. And a couple of them came back and said to Terry, "What are you still doing out here?" And he goes, "All my kids aren't in yet."
That's the, I understand the feeling. Let me ask you this, Jim. I was going to mention Gene Nudo, but I can save that because he did a great job, coaching job in his initial efforts as a, he was in the semi-pro ranks, and probably one of the best coaching jobs I've ever heard of. But let me ask you this: when you bring up the scenario that you just mentioned, if you were coaching, especially adults, would you have a tendency to be let boys be boys, or would you be more of a disciplinarian?
He has
in
to,
all areas.
He has to, in his case. In his case, he had to have a blend of both. Mm-hmm. He had to know when to slam down on him.
Sometimes you do, yeah.
Mm-hmm. He had to know when to slam down on him and when to, let the boys have their fun. When we moved, when the league moved, or when the team moved away from the city, played for years at Hanson. Mm-hmm. After the ball game out in the parking lot, it was a party.
Sure.
Out there. You move out to Downers Grove. You move out to Riverside, Brookfield. Mm-hmm. It's the reminder is none of that.
Right.
None of that.
Yeah, sure.
Pack your stuff up. Get out.
Yeah, that's well, Jim, you're making me think too that I think you have to, because these are guys who are adults and they're basically do they get paid a little bit or
No.
semi-pro? They don't.
No,
So-
no. The deal with semi-pro is you do have to pay a league fee to play.
Okay.
But ideally, you like to get as much sponsorship as possible to keep your league fee down as low as you can. Obviously, your sponsorship is going to cover the expenses of the game, the expenses of the team itself, just to be a part of the league.
What I found and of course, I haven't been involved in football semi-pro, but in 16-inch softball, where you're playing at a competitive level, you let the boys be boys, but then, as you say, sometimes you have to put the brakes on that. And I think my experience has been most of the time the players realize that that's the right thing.
They do.
When
Yeah.
you're because they realize, if you just let them party to kingdom come, then you've destroyed the reason you're there, to be competitive.
You've destroyed the reason you're there, and you just don't have a team. You don't have a team. Mm-hmm. You have a team that we've had to have I remember over the years we've had games that had, we get a phone call from another site that I said we had to stop the game in the third quarter.
Okay.
Because of the fights.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, we even reached a point with one particular game that when we had the league meeting the next night, the timing wise happened to be the league meeting was the next night. We got both sides pointing the finger at one another. Well,
Sure.
we didn't do this, and we finally said, all right, here's the deal. Here's the deal. If this game, I said, we're going to declare the game. I finally reached a point. I said, we're going to declare the game no contest. If this game has a bearing on the final standings, I said, we're going to pick it up at whatever point there was in that game, 9:32 to play in the third quarter. We're going to finish the game off, and we're going to finish the game off over at Portage Park.
Yeah, actually, Jim, I love your decision there. I mean, that's is a good way to deal with that whole situation.
That's why I was emeritus, all-seeing.
You were emeritus.
I was all-seeing.
Are you continuing to be emeritus?
I was all-seeing, all-knowing, all-omniscient.
That was a good decision.
Yeah. No, I just maintain the nickname. I am emeritus always.
Emeritus.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, you know what? This is a fascinating subject, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. And I'm sure we could go on and on. But am I right? I'm looking at the clock, and we're almost out of time here. Are we out of time?
John sits there and
Look
goes,
at John.
I don't know.
I don't know, John. That looks like you're imitating the great Buddha there with your hands like that. What does that mean?
I have a question to ask you.
Sure.
You gentlemen remember a football player with the Chicago Bears by the name of Robin Earl?
Sure, Robin
Sure do.
Earl.
Yeah.
He was another one that probably could go on the all-frustrating list.
He is 1977 to 1983. He was with the Chicago Bears.
He was big.
Well,
he was
did
a
you meet
big
him,
guy.
Jim? Did you meet him, John? Or
No, I didn't meet him, but I do another sports show here called Don of Sports.
Don Figuarelli.
Did he have Robin Earl here?
Yes, no, he didn't have him here, but he did talk to him on the air.
Okay.
He called in.
He was a big guy. I just remember
John,
he was huge.
He was a big man. He initially was a fullback, and they turned him into a tight end. I think he went to school up in, it might have been the University of Washington, I want to say.
He was from out west. That's what I do remember that.
Yes, because when he called into the show, he was out, I think in Seattle or somewhere like that.
All right, so
Okay.
that might be good. Yeah.
Did they touch on this? I thought it was Robin Earl or somebody that reminded me of Robin Earl, the same type of player. Did he ever do a sports talk show on one of like on a Sunday night or something, Sunday evening here in Chicago?
That I couldn't tell you.
Okay, I was wondering. I thought that he might have, but might have the wrong guy.
But he called in on the show, and we interviewed him on Don's Don of Sports, and then I called him back a couple of days later to let him know that the show was up on the website. Man, the man talked to me for over a half hour about the Bears and about different sports and different things. A very, very nice gentleman to talk to.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. He was actually. There was a case, John, where I know that you're not into football that much, but the guy there's a case where a player, Robin Earl in this case, was put in a position that he didn't really ask for. He was a high draft pick, drafted at a position that he played in college, and then moved to a different position. So, put it this way, if he wasn't up to snuff as a fullback professionally, and he didn't work out that way, that's not his fault. That's the fault of the team, the Bears in this case, that drafted him as a fullback and as a high round draft pick, and then decided that he wasn't a good fullback and made him into a tight end. That's not his fault. That's their fault.
You got an example right now. I mean, McClellan. They're trying to turn him into a linebacker.
Right. Right.
So, or getting him back to linebacker. He was a linebacker in college, but he was in the 3-4.
Yeah.
And they tried to make him an end.
Yeah.
And
right.
he was too he was too little. He was too light for it.
Yeah. Definitely.
So. But no, we've had some interesting topics, and we still didn't get into some of the things that I wanted to get into. Our all frustrating list.
Yeah.
That'll give you a couple of weeks to work on that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the all frustrating list, and I'm thinking about Jim Kelly because one of the guys, Rashaan Salam, is one of the guys he mentions, and Tim Worley, who I think I don't know, does he precede Salam or was he a little after him?
Oh, I can't remember. I'd have to go
Two
look.
talented players. Let's
Yeah.
put it this way. But
Yeah.
Jim Kelly would always say, and Jim's an old timer. Jim's got to be 75 plus, mailman, but very wise man, and succinct in his observations. But he'd say, Salam and Worley both had the problem with fumbling. He'd say, well, you know what? They're both dopers. He goes, the dopers always fumble. And it's true. They both were, and they fumbled a lot.
I think when I started to think about this, I mean, Bear players, I thought about Salam. I thought about Enos.
Mm-hmm.
Jay Cutler can be frustrating when he tries to be Gunslinger Jay.
Yeah.
You can get some frustration there.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, well, I don't know if I'd put Rick Meyer on the all frustrating list. I think I'd just put him on the all deer caught in the headlights look.
You know what? I've never seen, Jim, a player that that particular phrase was more appropriately applied to. I mean, when you would look at him on the field, you would say, man, this guy, I mean, I don't think I've seen that look on any other pro football player. I don't know what the heck happened to Rick Meyer that made him like that. Because his first year in the pros was pretty successful,
yeah,
right?
he was decent.
With Seattle?
With Seattle. And what was even funnier was you'd see Meyer on the field with that deer caught in the headlights look, and they'd put the camera on the sidelines, and Wanstead had the same look on his face.
Well, that was Wanstead's regular look.
Oh, a name that I was thinking of when we were talking about coaches that got to the wrong level. You mentioned Wanstead, and, Wanstead was a great, he had a lot of success as defense, as a defensive coordinator. You go back and you think about the guy who succeeded George Halas. Out-of-bounds Dooley, Jim Dooley.
Yeah.
Had no business being a head coach, but they said he was one of the most creative offensive minds.
Well, you know what, though, Jim? He may not have been a good head coach, but it seems to me that when you have a man like George Halas, who really knew the game, I think, really well, and decided that of all the players that he had under him over the years, Jim Dooley was going to be his successor. I have to say, when I looked at Jim Dooley, it was like one of those guys, I had no feelings about him because he didn't seem to be really the super personable. You didn't dislike him, but you didn't love him. I think, why did Halas pick him?
Because he was one of his guys. It was the Old Boy Network.
Sure, but there had to be something else. I mean, I don't see the old man just giving his franchise to somebody he thought was a nitwit.
Who knows? But it was funny too because as I said, as a kid going out to the games in late in the season and always being with a bunch of old-time Bear fans. Mm-hmm. Especially when Dooley had taken over and going to some games, then they either referred to him as two-step Dooley or out-of-bounds Dooley.
Okay.
Because there was always that sidelines pass, and he'd turn, catch it, 2 steps out of bounds.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that was a guy, great offensive mind, had no business being a head coach.
Yeah.
And I mean, the old man brought him back to be the offensive film quality control coach, just to put him in a room with a projector and film to see what he could come up with. He also was trying to help him because he had tough times financially too.
Okay.
Again, so the Old Boy Network. Hey, we've overstayed our welcome again.
Wow.
We've got like 10 pounds worth of stuff in a 5-pound bag.
That's right.
And we never seem to get through it. But we'll start the all frustrating list next time we get together.
Sounds good to me, Jim.
All right.
Thanks, John.
John DeVita, thanks as always for spinning the dials, keeping us sounding good, and crossing yourself before we started this, so we managed to stay calm. And
you are the best.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening. We are out of here.
You have been listening to Armchair Experts from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Wednesday, October the 15th on Jack-O-Lantern FM 89.7 WRHS FM Norwich and the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network with the WRHS sports announcers Jim Leon and Rich Massaro. This broadcast was directed by John DeVita. Audio engineer is James Rohde. Radio station manager is Kevin Zeflik. The executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network is Mr. John Seconda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Tuesday, October the 14th, the year 2014. Until next time, please be safe and thanks for listening.